left Casper and headed for the town of Keystone. It's famous because it's the location in Mount Rushmore, which is obviously the famous mountain where the four presidents' heads are carved into. I think the first thing you notice when you see them is, wow, that's pretty incredible, but there is an overall sense of, hey, they're much smaller than they looked on the telly. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I'm not trying to demean the amount of work that went into making them or anything like that, but they're definitely smaller than they've been represented on the TV. The bike at this stage was giving me a hell of a lot of trouble. The final drive was leaking and the clutch was starting to slip. It was slipping gears, fairly regularly. From Keystone, which is where Mount Rushmore is, I had about 800 miles to get to the BMW dealer in Minneapolis. And what I was hoping he'd be able to do is do something with the bike that would be able to get me the next 1,200 miles after that, which would take me to New York. I've been burning on the interstate for 2.5 states now. I'm in a bind. The final drive and the clutch on the bike are starting to pack in, and I'm hoping to get them as far as the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. A good friend of mine, Mike Bond, lives there, and there's a place which is reasonably close to there where hopefully I can get them fixed. I'm only a couple of 1,000 kilometers from New York, so I don't have to. I'm hoping that they'll just be able to get the clutch going as opposed to having to get it replaced, because with a Beamer, as soon as you go near the clutch, it's $1,000 before they'll do anything with it. So I really don't want to have to spend that sort of cash on it. And I've just been on the bike all day. My arse is numb, but it's been a beautiful day. But it's just been flat farmland for just an incredibly long period of time. It's amazing now when you're out on this kind of prairie land, for the want of a better word. I suppose it's mimicking the prairie land in Canada, and then as you push over then into Wyoming and South Dakota, well, north of that is Saskatchewan in Canada. So it's all the same stuff. It's all flat farmland, just mile after mile after mile of farmland and flatness. So it's weird. I did it on the trip I did from Toronto to Argentina via Alaska. I did it crossing Canada, and this time I've had to do it crossing the United States. It's all the one. It's all the one. It doesn't really matter now at this stage. It's so close. So the plan is pretty much just to go to the Twin Cities, well, Minneapolis. From there, go to Chicago and meet a guy, Bob Albieu is his name. He seems like a right headbanger, so I'm looking forward to meeting him. And then directly after that, I'm actually meeting another guy, Chris Daw, in Pennsylvania. And then after that, I'm actually meeting a person from Clondalkin, Derval Connell, from New York. She's from Ireland, but I'm meeting her in New York. The big pity is though that the bike is in bits because the clutch is on the way out. I really have to minimise the amount of gears I'm changing. So it's literally get the thing into sixth and run out a whole tank of gas, which on this on the 1200 is about 480 kilometers, and then to stop, then get it into sixth and go again. So I can't stop and start and get off the bike that much at all. But that's alright, again, I've been on and off the bike a billion times, so it's just strange that it's all finishing like this. I made my way to Minneapolis and was able to get the thing into a BMW garage. They were able to do enough with the bike so I was able to get back on the road. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it was enough that to be able to get it back to Dublin. I knew I was going to be retiring the bike when I got back to Ireland anyway. It was just going to go into my conservatory, so I didn't really care if the clutch wasn't suboptimal condition. When I was in Minneapolis, I met Dan McKenzie. He was a guy who had followed my blog on ADV Rider. It was only the second ever time since I'd started travelling that I actually met somebody who had been following my trip as it had gone along. And the same was true for Bob Albu in Chicago. When I met Bob and his wife, she went on to tell a great story of how he told her I was coming to visit. Apparently, over breakfast, he said to her, "Hey, there's a guy going to come and stay." And she went, "What? Who's going to come and stay?" "Oh, he's just some guy. He's travelling around the world on a motorcycle." "And who is he?" And Bob just says, "I don't know who he is." I said, "And how long is he going to stay for?" I really don't know." But that tells you an awful lot about Bob. He's so easygoing. In Ireland, we'd say if he was any more laid back, he'd fall back. And a couple of days later, then I hooked up with Chris Daw. He's one of the world's greatest motorcycle enthusiasts. He has a vast knowledge of pretty much every adventure motorcycle traveller that has ever been. I think Chris knows or has read about them, and it was great to kind of trade a couple of stories over a couple of beers, and he even introduced me to his mother, who was absolutely fantastic fun. Meeting all these people towards the back end of the trip helped stave off any of the doldrums I was feeling in my head about the trip coming to an end. The next morning after leaving Chris's house, I was heading for New York. He was kind enough to drive me up to the intersection where I'd turn and go straight. An hour or two later, I started to see the signs for New York City, and it wasn't long before I was stuck in one of the worst traffic jams I've ever seen on the George Washington Bridge. With the state my clutch was in, the bike broke down. I eventually got it started and managed to nurse it to a shipping company called Ship My Bike, who were shipping it back to Ireland for me. I didn't really feel any sense of accomplishment about getting to New York. I think the real accomplishment was probably getting to Vancouver. Crossing North America was more like a holiday, and barring an accident, it was inevitable. I always felt that I'd get to New York. So I kind of went on with the mechanics. I got the bike shipped, and then, got somewhere to stay, and then just went out and about New York and started looking at the sights. I got an open top bus tour. I went to Times Square, and I killed a couple of days hanging out with Derville and just going for a couple of beers. And I think 3 or 4 days later, I caught a plane and flew home to Ireland. Well, I'm back in Ireland. The two bikes are behind me. Sam Gamgee 1, which is the bike I used from Toronto to Alaska and then down to Ushuaia. And then Sam Gamgee 2, which is the 1200. That's the bike I went from Calgary down to Los Angeles and then the whole way down to Rio Gallegos. And it's also the bike that I went from Dublin to New York on. It's mad being back. First of all, I haven't really held this camera like this now in a long time, and I'm just used to see the beard here, you know what I mean? It kind of feels like, You know, it's gonna. Was my face not longer or something? You know, it's strange being back. Actually, you know, I start back in work now in a couple of weeks, and I just collected the bike, and myself and my brother manoeuvred it in the door. So the two bikes that stay in here for for as long as I'm alive, the bikes will stay here. And you know, somebody was kind of saying to me, would you not, why wouldn't you just sell them? And I said, well, you know, the bikes, I've been through too much with them, and you know, I don't ever want to sell them. And I still like to think that when I'm 70 or when I'm 80 years of age, you know, that I'll walk through the door there and see the two bikes, and then just get these little flashbacks about everything that happened. The bikes are relatively clean, but I didn't want to clean them too much actually. On the 1150, there's still a lot of dust and dirt from, you know, the Route of 40 and Bolivia, and I kind of like the fact that it's there. And on the 1200 again, it's clean, but there's definitely still some dirt there from Mongolia and the Road of Bones, and I love that. I love the fact that, and they're scarred. The bikes are scarred all over. You know, everywhere are signs of battle. You know, I like the idea of sitting down in a year or two and just kind of rubbing your hands around the bike and then seeing, you know, what's that scratch, what's that gash, and then in your head going, oh, I remember where that was from. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you when you come back from a major trip like that is to spend a lot of time walking, and it's to help you register the trip in your memory so that you don't forget it, and to try and help you internalise how much you actually achieved. And if you don't spend the time walking and you just went straight back to work or whatever, you know, within a month you'd be starting to forget that it ever happened. But it's a piece of advice I got from my mate Rafael in Venezuela. When I got to Ushuaia on the first trip, I was really struggling to kind of understand, well, what the hell did I do all this for? Where's the parade, blah blah blah, going through all that sort of soul searching. But walking really helped get the whole thing sorted in my head. It's an amazing thing to sit here thinking about it actually, now that it's all over. You know, even though it's not that long ago it all happened, there's days where you forget it ever happened at all. So coming back after the Dublin to New York trip, I knew it was going to be the last trip that I probably did for many, many years, mainly driven by financial considerations, and plus there's a time when you just have to get off the road. I know, you know, the stories out there about people who've been travelling for years and years, but I think travelling just for travelling's sake isn't any good. I'm not saying it's not any good, and I'm not saying that the people who are doing it aren't right to be doing it, but it's not for me. For me, these journeys were, you know, I suppose they were a journey of self-exploration and to try and test myself and to try and really, really, you know, go out and blow up the Death Star. And I did. And I'm kind of happy to put the whole thing behind me now and move on. I started the whole thing, and I remember reading a book called The Trail to Titicaca, and it's about 3 English lads who rode bicycles from Ushuaia up to Lake Titicaca between Bolivia and Peru, which is an incredible feat to do on bicycles. On motorcycles it's tough enough, but to do it on bicycles was an amazing thing altogether. But they brought out a kind of a special anniversary edition recently, and I read it, and the kind of prologue talks about what everybody's doing now and all that sort of stuff. And I was amazed that after such an incredible journey that people went back to doing exactly pretty much what they were doing prior to it. You know, everybody would like to think that it's a massively life-changing event, and it can be, but I think the change comes from this kind of extra sense of perspective that you get. You know, if you're sitting in a traffic jam, in your head you kind of go, that's not a traffic jam. Panama City was a traffic jam. You know, Central American borders were traffic jams. This is easy. So all of a sudden, having done it, nothing feels hard. Nothing feels like that it's not doable. Nothing feels that you couldn't accomplish it. Because fundamentally in your head, you know you've done this. So whatever life is going to throw at you after this, as long as you stay healthy, you're going to be able to kick it in the teeth.